Let's get into it now. A spoiler-free movie review of The Monkey, not to be confused with Monkey Man, not to be confused with Better Man, which also has a monkey, not to be confused with Godzilla vs. Kong, not to be confused with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. It is a big time for monkeys right now. If you put a monkey in a movie, I am going to go see that movie. And what this movie is about, it's based on a short story by Stephen King. So it's about a boy named Hal. He finds a monkey in his attic that belonged to his dad. And every time the monkey plays its cymbals and plays its drums, somebody around Hal dies. I love that the movie really doesn't give a whole lot of backstory, because sometimes when it comes to horror movies, whenever there's some object that can't be explained, they get into too big of an exposition of where this thing came from. I don't really care about that. Hops right into it. Feels like a bit of a Twilight Zone episode or Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode. It is pretty violent and brutal because all these people die in a very interesting way. A lot of them in ways I've never seen on screen before. There were some brutal kills. I've never been to a hibachi restaurant, but now I'm never going to. Never. Nope, I'm good on that. This movie is very inventive. It is from director Oz Perkins, who last year directed Longlegs, which I loved. And Longlegs had a much different feel to this movie. To me, Longlegs felt more sinister. That movie was more of a crime drama to me, and this one was a little bit more fun. And I love that it was different than Longlegs, but still felt like it was in his world. Oz Perkins is a director I feel just has his hand knowing what he wants to do and how to execute it, and that is important. And for a movie like this that I thought was going to be a little bit more comical, which at times it was, it wasn't overly comical, which I thought they were going to really lean into the campiness of the way some of the characters died. At times, it did get a little bit lighthearted, but at its core, it still felt like it had that integrity of trying to make a real twisted tale, and it kept me entertained from beginning to end. The movie is only 90 minutes long, so to me, it didn't really waste a whole lot of time once we got going. The first act was solid, which is all about these two brothers who are twins. They don't like each other. They're pretty much complete opposites, and they have this monkey come into their lives after finding it in their dad's attic. Belonged to him. They're curious about it. Once they pull it out of its box that has this really weird inscription on it, it just starts killing people. And that is what you kind of focus on in the first act of this movie. And then the rest of the movie is them 25 years later. They've been estranged. They haven't been in communication with each other. And the monkey is back, and it starts killing people again. So they have to find a way to defeat it. Theo James plays both twin brothers, which I enjoyed seeing how he could do two completely different characters. And it wasn't just a wardrobe. It was the way each of them spoke. To me, I think that was the highlight of this movie. The fact that I actually believe that there could be two of them. And anytime you have a movie where it's one actor playing two characters, I'm always waiting for that one scene whenever they both have to appear on screen, because whenever I watch a movie, I'm always looking for that stunt double. In any action scene, I'm like, oh, stunt double right there. The posture looks different. His form looks different. This dude is bulkier. I am annoying to watch a movie with because I always like to point out the stunt double. And whenever you do a movie where it's one actor playing twins, there's always that scene where they have to appear on screen together, and you're getting like the back of one character and the front of the other character, and you can tell that it's two different people. In this case, it wasn't as awkward whenever they're both on screen, because this movie did a really great job with the visual effects, so those scenes weren't that distracting. And I think when it comes to an Oz Perkins movie, it very much has this unique look to it that I really come to love. These great close-ups and interesting framings that really make this movie feel like its own thing. It feels like you're living in an Oz Perkins world when you watch The Monkey, when you watch Longlegs. And I think that is something that not only a great horror director needs to do, but any great director. And when it comes to a horror movie like this, you have to walk that line of how serious are you going to take yourself. And I think that's why a movie like this works, because the tone was just right. It took itself seriously enough that you actually cared and were rooting for some of these characters, rooting against some of these characters. You felt an emotional connection to his character when he was a younger kid to when he grows up. And it was that attachment that you really needed. So it had that sense of taking itself seriously enough, but then also when it came to some of the horror elements and there came time to have some fun with some of the ways that these people died, it didn't take itself as seriously. And I think it always comes down to that tone and the performances from the actors in a horror movie like this. Sometimes I feel that characters get a little bit too serious on what they find scary in a horror movie, where they oversell it a little bit. And they're trying to convince you how scary it is. And sometimes that loses me a little bit. And it was the way that the characters reacted to that that made it more believable. And the fact that they didn't take themselves too seriously is what really sold it. This movie also had really great writing. There were some lines of dialogue that really stuck with me. The movie centers around the theme of deadbeat dads, the relationship between you and your brother. So there's that sibling bond. Also, those feelings that you have when you don't really get along with your siblings. And then later, the theme shifts whenever one of the brothers becomes a dad and then has a son, not wanting to be like his dad. And there is a line that is discussed in the movie that really stuck with me, that I wrote it down. Death is the only thing that happens to all of us, yet we're all surprised when it does. I thought that was pretty profound because, like I was saying earlier, at times this movie is a little bit campy, but then you have some lines like that, the themes that they try to drive home when it comes to these relationships. And that one just kind of stuck with me. So, proving to me that this movie had more depth than I was expecting. I thought it was just going to be ridiculous death after ridiculous death, which it did have that. There were some great stills and moments in this movie that I was like, that's a great death. That's a great shot. That is a great way to show how this monkey is wreaking havoc. And the monkey itself looked phenomenal. I wanted to get out and touch that thing because it looks so cool. So that was another great piece. I feel like that is going to be another great movie artifact in the horror genre. And I think the thing I love now about Oz Perkins, that he's becoming a director that I'm going to start investing my time in. And anytime he puts out a movie, it's one I'm going to take note of. It's because the movie is so effortlessly interesting and it's so uniquely itself. And it was the only time I had seen a horror movie like this where I actually thought maybe they could make a prequel, because they don't spend a whole lot of time focusing on the origins of this monkey, which I think was great. That would have been a waste of time. Sometimes I feel like horror movies always explore that a little bit too much, of like, where did this monkey come from? We must find the source. Or sometimes in really cliched horror movies, there's this big drawn out moment where they find somebody living in some remote hut and go ask them about the questions of this ancient artifact, and then they get the story, and then they had to go rush to save somebody. They didn't have that at all in this movie, and I was glad they didn't do that. So for that reason, I give the monkey 4 out of 5 symbols.